absolute captain.
Trevor Harris in green and gold now. Goes in zone. And got it! Oh, what a catch! Greg Ellingson! Are you kidding me?
Edmonton Eskimos, Trevor Harris, they have their guy back. They're going to come in here and try to destroy this party. These Eskimos are one game away from making history.
Why not us?
Why not us, you know?
Trevor Harris and the Edmonton Eskimos.
Going to Hamilton for the right to go to the Grey Cup.
See you in the hammer.
Green and gold, black and gold. Winner goes to the Grey Cup game. Trevor Harris is down. Eskimos are out.
Hi again, and welcome to another edition of CFL 2020. I'm Rod Smith. The very title of this show should come with a question mark at the end, because at the time of this broadcast, we still don't know if the CFL will play in 2020. But we do know that if there is a season, it has to be decided very soon. Until we know one way or the other, we're going to continue our previews with a look now at Edmonton. Last year, despite a losing record, they crossed over and made it to the Eastern Final before losing to Hamilton. But that wasn't enough to save Jason Moss's job as head coach. He was let go and replaced by former Argos head coach Scott Milanovich, back from 3 seasons in the NFL. And as you can see, there have been several roster changes too. Here's Ryan Rashad with more.
If there is a CFL season this year, the Green and Gold will play so without a new team name. But they are hoping to establish a significant identity as a group. And the man in charge of helping to establish that will be new head coach Scott Milanovich and his staff. Now, coming in as a new head coach in the best of times is difficult. You have to implement an entirely new system. You have to get players accustomed to a playbook. It takes time to really feel like you've hit the ground and have the chance to truly run. Well, trying to achieve all those things during a COVID offseason has likely been that much more difficult. He will lean heavily on his veteran quarterback in Trevor Harris and on a lot of veteran returning players, but it will be interesting to see if and when things get going, how a new coaching staff will be able to make its mark despite the limitations they've been dealing with in the previous months.
Let's zoom back in on the CFL on TSN panel of Matt Dunnigan, Henry Burris, Milt Stegall, and Davis Sanchez, and start with Edmonton's defense, Milt. I mean, this was a pretty good D in 2019, given their 8-10 record, middle of the pack, best in the CFL, actually, in yards allowed per game, but some significant losses at linebacker especially.
Yeah, and you talk about those losses. You talk about Don Unamba, the president. Talk about Larry Dean. Those linebackers. And you also talk about Josh Johnson, who I think is one of the better defensive backs in the CFL. He's gone to Winnipeg. So they have some losses there. It's good they still have that defensive line intact. And one player I'm looking to have a big impact this year is Javon Santos-Knox. He was their big free agent signing from last year, had the big year in 2018 in Winnipeg. He was only able to play 5 games last year, including the playoffs, because of injury and just he couldn't get back on the field when he was injured. So they're looking for a big season from him.
I look at a couple other guys that are still with the club that are impact players that I think have more breakout years. Vontae Diggs is one. I really like his play from last year, as well as Blair Smith. I think he's a guy that's underrated and really adds a layer of experience and ability there as well. But when you have a defensive line like the Edmonton Eskimos, and I think that's what for last year, and certainly with Armando Siwa always being in the mix, and I think it starts there.
Yeah, if you look at the 2 guys that they're going to miss the inside that Milt alluded to, and then that's Don Unamba and Josh Johnson. Think about those guys. Halfbacks or inside cover guys are the toughest guys to replace. The one thing about those guys, their biggest strengths weren't necessarily their coverage skills. They were excellent last year, but really they're disruptive guys who can do a lot of different things, versatility in that secondary. I'm surprised they didn't find a way to keep those guys, because the way Noel Thorpe plays his defense, zone blitzing, those guys will be perfect for his defense.
Well, I know we're sitting here talking about their linebackers, the losses there, and, of course, how their defensive backs are. But to me, guys, I'm going to say that defensive line is still one of the best in the league, but I think they suffered a big loss up front by losing Nick Usher coming to the NFL. And the thing is, to me, he was one of the brightest young kids up and coming in the CFL, his ability to pass rush, whether it's a speed rush or using that speed rush, but then dipping inside, getting sacks, I think they're going to lose that effect of him because we all know an effective pass rush makes a defensive back's job easy. Ain't that right, David Sanchez?
We're supposed to be in week 8 by now of CFL 2020, so have a look back at the top 5 plays of week 8 in 2019. We'll be back.
Second and 5, Tasker, look out. He is unloaded on by L.J. McRae.
It's just outside the 10, needing a touchdown. End zone look, and they've got it. What a comeback. And they came from 20 points down to do it.
O'Neill's kickoff to Williams from his 7, and there's that opening for Terry Williams. Can O'Neill bring him down? No way! And how about this? 103 yards. Terry Williams gets it right back. That move, unreal.
Trying to find Paydirt. Adams forced out. Rushes down inside the 5. Dobbs for the ball. Looks like he had the touchdown. Dedmon back at his 10. Bounces once, no yards. There goes Dedmon again. Stays on his feet. Devontae Dedmon still on his feet. No way! Are you kidding me? Foot race now, Dedmon down the sideline. An amazing return by Devontae Dedmon. My goodness!
To test the real cheese and new Cheez-It Crunch.
How about new?
No.
No way.
Quarterfinals, live on TSN.
Although Harris was productive in 2019, second in the league in passing yards in only 13 games, the Double E's offense struggled to produce points, fewest among playoff teams in 2019. So now Jason Moss is gone and replaced by another head coaching quarterback guru in Scott Milanovich, who knows Harris very well. To the guys inside the booth, Glenn Suter and Dwayne Ford.
Dwayne, let's focus in on the offense of the Edmonton Football Club. So that means Trevor Harris, his weapons, and a new head coach who's not new to Harris.
Yeah, and Glenn, we talk a lot about the relationship between head coaches, their quarterbacks, and how that goes a long way in determining the success of an offensive unit in the CFL. Harris's old coach, Jason Moss, was, of course, his first quarterback coach in the CFL from 2012 to 2014 in Toronto. The head coach of those teams, of course, the Green and Gold's new head coach, Scott Milanovich. Now, it was under Milanovich that Harris developed into a legitimate Canadian Football League starter. And in fact, in their 2015 season together, that was when Harris threw what is still his career high, 33 touchdown passes. So that familiarity and history gives Scott a pretty good starting point in terms of understanding Trevor's strengths, weaknesses, and what makes him tick. But maybe more importantly, whether it was under Moss in Edmonton or Jamie Elizondo in Ottawa, every offensive system that Trevor Harris has played in his career has been derived from the things that Scott Milanovich did in Toronto. So now we talk about the relationship between head coach and quarterback. Let's talk now about that relationship between pass and run.
Well, Harris's best year as a pro was probably 2018 in Ottawa, where he threw for over 5,000 yards. That year, he had William Powell in the backfield. Powell rushed for 1,300. It was that balance that led Ottawa to a Grey Cup appearance that year. So now we look at the Edmonton backfield and you wonder if there's a little bit of uncertainty there, but I want to focus in on Shaq Cooper. He played 5 games last year and showed great upside potential. In his first game against the Argos, he rushed for over 100 yards. And here the Argo linebacker has his angle. He believes it'll be downhill to the point of attack. But when Cooper hits the hole and shows that great burst of speed to the outside, that linebacker is now in a chase position. In fact, every defender has to adjust their angles to about 3 or 4 yards ahead of Cooper to compensate for that speed. So how does this help Trevor Harris in the passing game? Well, let's go back and show you those Argo linebackers and how they've compensated for the speed of Cooper. Now they are ahead of the game and overreacting to the run. They're caught in play action, which means they can't drop under this route that gives Greg Ellingson lots of room to go to work. And we know that Ellingson is one of the great route runners in the Canadian Football League. So, Dwayne, if they can find that balance on offense, they are going to be tough to stop.
Well, whether passing or running, a big strength for them would be that offensive line, and they hope to be even stronger with the return of Sir Vincent Rogers, who missed all of last season due to injury.
And Trevor Harris's favorite target continues to be Greg Ellingson, just as it was when they were together in Ottawa. Last year, Ellingson was Edmonton's leading receiver with 86 catches for over 1,100 yards, his 5th straight season going over 1,000. Here he is with Brian.
Greg, thanks for taking some time to join us. And I want to get into some X's and O's and talk football, but there's a few other things on the docket that we should probably touch base with you on. A name change for the football club. What are your thoughts on such a significant change and how you sort of process that?
Oh, man, I feel like, things like that are definitely, out of most of our control. That's going to come from the people that, the Inuit community. And if they feel like that's something that's offensive or, that it needs to be changed, then they should definitely speak out. And, it's not our job to determine whether we think it's offensive or derogatory or not. That if it is, then we change it. It seems like that's what it's been done. I'd always known as, an Eskimo as being something that, we were proud of, the Eskimo way. And I was only there for a year, but they spoke very highly of, what that culture was, the winning culture in Edmonton. If the times called for a change, then we're going to change. But the pride that we have of being, an Edmonton football team and the history, none of that's going to change.
And I would think of all years to try and, bring a new head coach in and all of the changes and adjustments that come with that. The situation you guys find yourselves in here this offseason, unable to maybe gather the way you might like. How difficult has this situation made an already unique situation and a new head coach and a new system and all the communication that should be going along with that?
Well, I mean, as far as having a new coach, I've been there a couple times and, it's always a learning curve because they might have a different cultural aspect that they want to, implement with a team or, maybe the play calling's different. The installations might have different terms and, ways that, the X's and O's are set up. But, that's part of, football and learning and any job or activity. You're going to have to shift your focus. You're going to have to learn differently. And, football's a game where you're putting in 40, 50 new plays a week. So, you're always going to have those steady habits. And, that's kind of what camp is about. You go in, you have endless days from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. where you're installing plays every week to get ready for the season. We don't have that right now, and I mean the hope is we still have a 2020 season.
Henry, I can't remember how many times we all watched Edmonton get down inside the 20-yard line and settle for field goals instead of touchdowns. A productive offense at many times, but not where it matters most in terms of scoring points. That's something I would think must change this time around.
Well, that's probably the number one objective for Scott Milanovich as far as getting that offense going with a guy like Trevor Harris. But we've always talked about the supporting cast that he had around him. Of course, last year they had C.J. Gable, Greg Ellingson, DeVaris Daniels, a number of different guys out there that are that have big play potential each and every time the ball is snapped to the quarterback. But the thing is, this is an offense that averaged just over 370 yards of offense per game. But guys, they were second last in the league in scoring touchdowns with only 37. Toronto had more touchdowns than Edmonton did last year. So that kind of shows you just how ineffective they were in the scoring zone.
Talked about last year, C.J. Gable was their guy. No disrespect to C.J. Gable, but he's nowhere near as versatile as Shaq Cooper is. You talk about in the red zone, he's that player where you can throw him that screen. You can throw him those bubble passes, and he can make plays. He only played in 7 games last year, including the playoffs, and they threw the ball to him 24 times, and 21 of them ended in receptions. He is that player who can help him in the red zone. Of course, you have Ellingson, who's your main guy, but when they're keying on him, I could see them getting the ball to Shaq Cooper a lot more, not only running the ball, but even more importantly, passing the ball in the score zone.
Yeah, Milt, a couple other options there. Terry Williams and Brandon Burks, I think, are guys that are very similar to Coop and what they bring to the table and speed and versatility down there in that score zone. But I think it falls on the shoulders of Trevor Harris. And Hank, when you get down there, it's not about having threes. It's about making sixes and putting the ball in the end zone. And that was a problem, obviously. We're talking about it last year for Trevor Harris and company. I think Scott Milanovich and his relationship with Trevor is going to help that. I think they'll be on the same page. I think that'll help Trevor calm down in there.
The one thing that hurts the Edmonton football team and Trevor Harris is his lack of mobility. And you two guys know it. As a quarterback, down in the red zone, when those backers can get depth and clog up those tight windows with depth, and the quarterback's not a threat to run the ball in, which Trevor is probably average at best in regards to athletic ability at the quarterback spot in the CFL, that makes those areas down there a lot tighter and the windows a lot tighter.
So you're saying that tap dancing he did a couple of years ago didn't help him out?
Yeah, no.
Is that what you're saying, Chad?
Nah.
Well, he was pulling fire trucks, so I'm sure that was his
that might have helped.
So he'll be ready to go.
Red zone, green zone, scoring zone. There's only thing matters really to Edmonton, and that is end zone the next time they get on the field. Stick around. Coming up, we could have picked 2 all-time teams from Edmonton. We're only allowed to choose one. This is CFL 2020 on TSN. What a week it was for Devontae Dedmon. In eye-opening fashion, the Ottawa returner set a franchise record in Week 8.
Still on his feet. No way. Are you kidding me? Foot race now. Dedmon down the sideline. An amazing return by Devontae Dedmon.
382 return yards would be good enough for second in the single-game record book. First on the list, Larry Taylor's 428 yards back in 2012. No CFL organization has built dynasties like Edmonton. They won the Grey Cup 3 straight years in the 1950s, and a record 5 in a row from 1978 to 82, and 5 more times since then. It's a franchise that has produced multiple Hall of Fame players at every position, but we can only choose one all-time Edmonton roster. Hugh Campbell followed up an outstanding playing career with an even more impressive tenure as a head coach. During 6 seasons as Edmonton's bench boss, Campbell led his team to the Grey Cup every year, losing the first before reeling off a record 5 straight titles. In what was the hardest decision among the all-time teams, Ricky Ray narrowly beats out Warren Moon at quarterback, the franchise passing leader in career attempts, completions, yards, and touchdowns. Ray was the team's most outstanding player 5 times and led them to victory in the 2003 and 05 Grey Cups. No one has played more games in the green and gold than Hall of Famer Rod Connup. A 3-time Grey Cup champion, Connup was a 6-time League All-Star and the most outstanding lineman in 1989. Joining him on the line are fellow Hall of Famers Frank Morris and Roger Nelson, 6-time Cup champ Hec Pache, and Bill Stevenson, whose 7 Grey Cup titles tie him for the most in CFL history. The incomparable Johnny Bright leads a stellar Edmonton backfield. The franchise leader in career and single-season rushing yards, Bright had 3,600-yard games and a Hall of Fame career, highlighted by 3 Grey Cup championships. Standing at just 5'7", fullback Normie Kwong set the gold standard for Canadian running backs and has the most rushing touchdowns in Edmonton history. Brian Kelly leads an impressive receiving corps that was tough to narrow to just 4. A 6-time All-Star and 5-time Grey Cup champ, Kelly set franchise highs in receptions, receiving yards, and 1,000-yard seasons. With 97 career touchdowns, Kelly found the end zone more than any player in the history of the green and gold. In 6 stellar seasons, Tom Scott was 5 times an All-Star and Grey Cup champion. Terry Vaughn was the first player in CFL history to get 1,000 receptions. And Adarius Bowman nabs the final spot on the strength of a phenomenal 3-year stretch in 2014-16. When it comes to the best returners in CFL history, one name stands above the rest: the Giz. Hall of Famer Henry Gizmo Williams was an electrifying playmaker who was a threat to score every time he touched the ball. He holds virtually every CFL returning record, including a Pro Football high 26 punt return touchdowns. The dynamic duo of 6-time Cup champion kicker Dave Cutler and big leg punter Hank Alisic round out an unparalleled special teams unit. Nicknamed Dr. Death, local boy Dave Fennell was a 5-time League All-Star, the most outstanding defensive player in 1978, and the top Canadian a year later. A key member of the famed Alberta Crew defense. Ron Estey played in 8 Grey Cups, winning 6. Stu Hill's 102 sacks are a franchise best, and current player Elmondo Sewell is a 6-time League All-Star. Few players in CFL history were as intimidating as linebacker Dan Kepley. 3 times the most outstanding defensive player, the relentless, hard-hitting Kepley was the backbone of a defense that went to 7 Grey Cups, winning 6. Willie Pless is the franchise all-time tackle leader, and 6-time All-Star Danny Bass rounds out a Hall of Fame trio. Larry Highbaugh carved out an outstanding career in Edmonton, leading the team with 66 career interceptions and 770 interception return yards. Canadians John Widereni and Oscar Kruger are 2nd and 3rd on the team's interception list. Joe Holloman's 7 interception return touchdowns are a franchise high. And multi-position legend Rollie Miles was team MVP 3 times. In his 9 years in Edmonton, Jackie Parker carved out a career with few equals. Playing quarterback, running back, DB, and kicker, Parker was the heartbeat of a team that won the Grey Cup 3 times. He was a league all-star 8 times and won 3 Most Outstanding Player awards. John LeGrone was one of the most influential players in team history. Warren Moon was a 5-time Cup champ and retired from the NFL as pro football's all-time leading passer. And equipment manager Dwayne Mandrusiak makes the team as he celebrates an unprecedented 50th season with the green and gold. Well, we have one guy on the panel in particular that knows so many names on this list and played with many of them. Hall of Fame quarterback Matt Dunigan. And think of all the great QBs in the history of the Edmonton franchise, Matty. You followed Warren Moon and Tom Wilkinson. You played for the legendary Jackie Parker. And following you, Damon Allen, Tracy Ham. So Ricky Ray as the all-time quarterback. What do you think of that choice?
No. Ricky Ray leads all the categories with the Edmonton Eskimos and passing yards and completions and touchdowns. And I understand the thinking that he should be that guy, but Jackie Parker set the precedent in the 50s, and he's a 3-time Grey Cup champion. I think that he set the bar there that everybody has been trying to live up to ever since then. And there's been some guys to do it. Certainly, you talked about Don Getty, Bruce Lumberman, Tom Wilkinson, of course, Warren Moon. And then they start getting into guys, myself, Damon, Tracy, Jason Moss, Danny McManus, Ricky Ray. The list just keeps going, and the Edmonton Eskimos just keep having success with that position. But I think it's got to be one of the 3, and Jackie Parker, Warren Moon, or Tom Wilkinson. Look, Jackie Parker set the bar. Wilkie was a guy that you wanted to play for. Went to 8 Grey Cups, won 5 of them. And Warren, when he was there, never lost. In 5 of his 6 years, he was at 5 Grey Cups. So I got to go with Jackie Parker, who set the bar high.
One I want to touch on is Warren Moon. And I want to touch on it because of his plight as far as when it pertains to his football career. You think about his college career, success he had, but the fact that he did not get an opportunity to play in the NFL right away because the color of his skin. The GMs and executives back then in the NFL felt that black quarterbacks weren't smart enough to play in the NFL. Well, because of that, the CFL came a-calling. NFL's lost CFL game, and Warren came and ripped it up for 6 years. 5-time Grey Cup winning quarterback. First 5 years, the first quarterback in professional football history to throw for 5,000 yards. Then after his 6 years in the CFL, went and ripped it up in the NFL for 17 years. The only quarterback to be inducted into the NFL Hall of Fame who was a free agent, and the only professional football player to be inducted into the NFL Hall of Fame and the Canadian Football Hall of Fame. Not bad for a quarterback who was once told he wasn't smart enough to play professional football in the NFL.
Well, I know Edmonton definitely is known for their quarterbacks, but I got to look at the linebackers, guys, because I had enough of these guys who hit me over the years. But you look back in the history of Edmonton, I think their history with linebackers is almost as more decorated than quarterbacks, because you look back in the days of Kepley, Bass, look at all those great players, even to the days of Willie Pless when I first entered the league. But the 2 guys I want to focus on is A.J. Gass and this guy named number 47, that's a pretty good little player also, J.C. Sherritt. But the thing is, guys like A.J. Gass, guys like Kepley, guys like Bass, they were the driving force behind these teams.
These all-time teams, guys, every week, unfortunately, guys are omitted because partly of their success. And free agency, they have success on teams, and then free agency and offers take them other places. Because they haven't played for a single team long enough, They often don't make these teams. I'm going to name 2 guys. Greg Butler, Coach Greg Butler, who was on those Eskimos great teams. First 4 years on those teams to the Grey Cup, 3 times. And when do we ever see this? An all-CFL halfback 3 years in a row, also leading in punt returns in his division. You don't see that very often. And James Quick Parker, guys, one of the best pass rushers ever in this league, not on the team, because he only played 4 years, maybe 3 years, with the Edmonton football team.
Just a tremendous history for that organization. Since starting in the late 40s, no franchise has won the Grey Cup more times, 14 in all for Edmonton, many times the city of champions. That's our show. As said from the outset, we continue to await word from the league on the fate of an abbreviated season. But regardless, we will be back next week to talk about the Argos on CFL 2020.